Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Mawlana Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala ashabihi ajma'in wa ala azwajihi ajma'in. I am most grateful to Masjid Al-Rahman for affording me again an opportunity to continue my humble effort at istihda, at taking hidayah from Surah Al-Fatiha. I am also most grateful to the congregation for their time and for their attention. Before going into Surah Al-Fatiha, I would like to express my sadness at the condition of the heartlands of the Muslim world. Many of us by now have already seen drone photography, drone video photography of the major cities of Syria. These major cities of Syria lie in total ruin. To see them in this condition, those cities where giants of Islamic knowledge lived and live, where the height of Islamic learning was once in vogue, today are pictures of a horrifying dystopia, pictures of an earthly hell. To see the city like that and to see their children, to see our children, our mothers and our fathers starving to death is most traumatic. This is the condition of Syria. At this very same time, if we look at the efforts of Sweden, Syria is in ruin and is being further destroyed. At the very same time, Sweden is in a project of major upgrade. So what I'm trying to say is we look at our heartlands and we look at countries which are part of the world, which we are also linked. We live, of course, and we have always lived in a globalized world. But why this disparity, where in our heartlands bombs from throughout the world are rained down on? But in Sweden, if you check videos, projections, you will see an earthly paradise in creation. In other Nordic countries, while Syria is being obliterated, it will take even 1,000 years would not be enough to rebuild it. And the very idea of rebuilding is an eraser of the very act of genocide. In the Nordic countries, while this is taking place, they are not talking about, they are completing projects in public toilets, where public toilets are made beautiful. They are putting art in public toilets. This is the condition of the Nordic world. And on the other hand, this is the condition of Syria. Why, we must ask, this disparity of destruction on the one hand and construction on the other hand? It is also traumatic as a student of Islam, and we are all students of Islam. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said we must study from our childhood till our death. It is traumatic to see Yemen being bombed and being obliterated. I want to remind ourselves and to pay homage to Yemen. Yemen has a very, very great role. It played a seminal role in the history of Islam as far as the dissemination of the Quran is concerned. What am I talking about? When we look at the geopolitics and the geostrategic position of Yemen and its link as a peninsula to the major ocean currents, what happened from the Khilafah of Hazrat Umar downwards to the Umayyads, to the Abbasids, and for many, many decades thereafter. Yemen was the center where the Quran was written. Many, many copies of the Quran. This is the days before the printing press, when the printed word was, when the written Quran and books were a product of long labor, and they were a product that was an expensive undertaking. What the Islamic enterprise was in Yemen, Yemen is one of the centers in the history of Islam of public education. If you read in paleography, there is a major and seminal discovery in the archaeology of Yemen where manuscripts of the Quran were found. And what are those manuscripts, pieces, parchments, etc.? Those pieces and parchments are the products of what we call the maktab. There is a field in the sciences related to the Quran called Rasmul Khat, how to write the Quran. As the Islamic da'wah was going out throughout the world, the task and the necessary instrument of that global effort of Islamic da'wah was to make the Quran available to the world as a text to be read. And the place where this thing occurred, this enterprise occurred, was in Yemen. They would have a maktab where a qari would supervise numerous scribes, and he would read, and another person would read, and there would be supervisors to check after every cluster that was recited. It was then written, it was proofread. In the books of Rasul Khat, they tell you how this enterprise took place. A line wrote, seniors went through that line to check that everything was correct. That same parchment was then moved to the back of the maktab. Other scribes rechecked it because you get used to your own effort. That parchment was then sent back to the front, and like that, hundreds upon hundreds of Qurans were written and were disseminated to the world. This was the role that Yemen played. And if we look at the sea routes of Yemen to Africa, and when we look at makhtutat, what we call paleography, the Qurans that obtain on the east coast of Africa are of Yemeni provenance. So as far as the Quran and Africa and Yemen are concerned, our ties with this place, with this seminal center of learning, where public education in Islam was pioneered, are very deep. It is said that today, those mountains in which they carved and built these maktabs, where inside the mountain is a place of coolness, so they could sit and they could write for a lengthy period of time. It is a tragedy that those very maktabs, which should be preserved and which should be looked after with every stone and every relic that is there, are today bombed. It is a very, very sad day for us. Number three, what I'd like to say is, when we as Muslims speak about the Middle East, It is not an interference. Islamic identity is a universal identity. We have a vested interest, the same way European countries, Western countries, Anglophone countries, Francophone countries, when you read their seminal thinkers in their journals, when you listen to their very political officials, when you listen to the giants of the oil trade in the Western capitals, they talk about our interests in the oils of Arabia. And yes, they have an interest. The entire economy depends on that particular oil. There's nothing to dispute, but the nature of the relationship is what must be explored. Similarly, mutatis mutandis, بالتغييرات اللازمة. We as Muslims, no matter who you are, there is now developing an Arab Zionism. And Arab Zionism says that no, if you are not Arab, you must not interfere in our affairs. No, sir. Islamic identity is a universal political identity, number one. Number two, before the oil boom, who kept the Islamic heartlands of Mecca, Medina alive with money? Who kept it alive? The Muslim Ummah. From Africa, caravan loads of gold and precious commodities and precious goods were sent to Mecca and Medina to sustain that place. From Africa, caravan loads of wealth were sent to make free water available to the Hujjaj. From the Indian subcontinent, large resources were sent to make food available to the Hujjaj. So we as Muslims have a direct and an intense vested interest in those heartlands. We have every right to speak about it. We have every right to be concerned about it. Coming to Surah Fatiha, I would like to look at 3 or 4 of its names. These names are given by Al-Qadi Nasiruddin Abu Sa'id Abdullah Al-Baydawi, Sahib Anwar al-Tanzil wa Asrar al-Ta'wil. We know Anwar al-Tanzil is actually a reworking of Al-Kashaf of Zamakhshari. One name Qazi Baydawi gives for Surah Al-Fatiha is Surah Al-Ruqya. This word Ruqya is abused, not misunderstood, it is abused. The term Ruqya has the meaning of irtiqa, meaning that statement that pushes community and society from jahiliyyah to progress. Irtiqa is to move from a negative condition to a positive condition. So what tends to happen is there is an abuse of this term, and this seminal idea is pushed down, and the Quran is used in the sphere of what in science one would call quackery. We cannot take Surah Fatiha or any part of the Quran and then start assaulting a woman or a man or somebody like that and say, no, we are now beating the jinn out of that person while we are reading Surah Fatiha. This is quackery. In any civilized place in the world, a person who does that, he will be criminally prosecuted and he will be imprisoned. Because to assault a woman, of course, that woman is good. Once you torture, even the human rights lobby in the United States of America, they tell you, once you assault a person, he is going to say whatever you want him to say. Now you take a young innocent lady, you accuse her of something, you have some suspicions, she's totally powerless. You take her 12 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, and you take her to some dungeon, a person who is a quack, that's what it's called quacker, and you start assaulting her. This is not what the Quran is all about. The meaning of Surah Al-Ruqya is al-irtiqa min al-jahiliyyah ila al-Islam. The Quran is not meant to be an instrument to assault innocent people. Number two, what I'd like to say is that as far as the Quran is concerned, we must make some effort. There must be a system of education that affords to every Muslim a mastery of the Arabic language. And here we should take a stock of ourselves. We, the Muslim community in South Africa, we do not have a system of education. What you have in the madaris is not a system of education. A person goes to an Islamic school from grade 1 to grade 12 and he doesn't understand Arabic. He doesn't have absolute mastery of the Quranic language, the conjugation, the grammar, the morphology. It means that education system is an absolute failure. If this thing occurred in what is called the secular world, the whole country would come to a standstill. Nothing would be able to work. So what I am saying is we must review and we must look at our system of education. Now, inshallah, today I want to, in summary, conclude our treatment of Surah Al-Fatiha. We spoke on ayah number 3, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And I said this is the highest value of Islam. Ayah number 4, Malik Yawmiddin. What is the meaning of this? That we as a people must always be conscious of the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you read Malik Yawmiddin, you read the Tabaqat literature. Tabaqat literature is a category of literature, biographies of ulama. When you read the biographies of Islamic justices also, you find a rampant theme of bribery and corruption. There is nobody, just because he says, I am Hazrat so-and-so, or he has this color of turban, or he has this color of scarf, or whatever, automatically he is now impermeable to anything. When you read the Tabaqat literature, you will be appalled by the level of corruption that obtained even in the Islamic justice systems. So this ayah speaks to this execution of justice, that every time and all the time we must always carefully look at the execution of the legal system. For example, in the legal systems that are practiced today, if a case, and a seminal case goes to court, you will have the prosecuting party, the defending party on both sides. And then on the watching that as a bowl, so to speak, you will have an academic community who will look carefully at a major case. And when the judgment is delivered, you will find an academic community which will analyze that judgment, as we have with our constitutional court today. Sadly, in the Islamic world, we don't have the system of self-interrogation. The system of self-interrogation is necessary to maintain the integrity of the judiciary and what Montesquieu called the trias politica, the executive and the other arms of government. This thing is necessary and important to revive. Ayah number 5, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. After announcing a consciousness of our position of judgment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam pledges, and he calls with the plural verb na'budu. He pledges that we must do only that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ayah number 6 is a very, very important ayah. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, and it links to the name given by Qadi Begam Anwar and by Allama Zamakhshari in Kashaf. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, Surah Ruqya. That is to progress. A child goes to school, he's got to progress. A person opens a business, there must be a progress in turnover to meet rent, etc., etc. Hidayah is that thing, that guidance which takes one forward. Now this thing about as-sirat al-mustaqim, it seems that this term is not grasped carefully. A road is not just a road. A road must take you somewhere, and it must take you to something seminal. It must take you to a harbor. It must take you to a factory. It must take you to a building, to a mosque. It must take you to a home. This ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, it links with the very idea of surah. What is the Quran and what is surah? Surah, in essence, is a wall or a building. The Quran is, in that sense, in the area of tamthil, it is a building of suitable ideas to protect you from evil, from the rajm of shaitan. What is the rajm of shaitan? For example, alcohol. The hurma of the Quran, the wall of the Quran, when you are behind that hurma, so to speak, you are protected from alcohol. You do not drink, you do not fall into alcoholism and drugs and smoking. Smoking, beyond any shadow of doubt. If you go to the hospitals and you see what is thoracic cancer, and you see what is esophageal cancer, and then you will understand why smoking tobacco consumption is completely haram. There is no way it is makruh tahrimi or anything like that. The ulama who spoke before did not even have an elementary understanding of standard 5 science. That is why they spoke as they spoke. So ihdina sirat al-mustaqim is to the ideas of the Quran protect us from everything that is wrong. To have unguarded intimacy is going to put you in danger of disease. When you stand behind the surah, the wall of the Quran, your protection is that you must marry or you must make sabr. And mut'ah is completely haram. The very ayah that, while I have high respect for the madhab of Imam Ja'far, as to train as a Maulvi, in the Delhi system of which I am a product, you cannot qualify unless you read Tahrirul Usul ila Ilmul Usul, that is a Ja'fari book. I am also a student of Allama Hamid Ahmad Muhammad Amiruddin, and I studied Qadi Nu'man Ismail. But mut'ah is completely haram. If you want to marry somebody, you marry biniyatil abad. You marry that person permanently. There is no such thing that you marry somebody only for 6 months and then afterwards you marry somebody else for 6 months. So the surah of the Quran, it protects you from everything. Gambling, I want to stop there. You people are a business community. You know more about life than I know about life. You know about people who have lost large sums of money and people who have collapsed because of gambling. When you stand behind the surah, the wall of the Quran, it protects you from them. So let me stop there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us understanding of the Quran, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us always behind the surah of the Quran and protect us from the rajm of shaitan. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Which is more violent, the Quran or the Bible? A software engineer analyzed the Quran and the Bible to see which was more violent, and here's what he found. This article was published in the Independent newspaper about 1 or 2 weeks ago and was written by Samuel Oswald. An analysis into whether the Quran is more violent than the Bible found killing and destruction occur more frequently in the Christian text than the Islamic. Investigating whether the Quran is really more violent than its Judeo-Christian counterparts, software engineer Tom Anderson processed the text of the holy books to find which contained the most violence. In a blog post, Mr. Anderson explains, the project was inspired by the ongoing public debate around whether or not terrorism is connected with Islamic fundamentalism, reflects something inherently and distinctly violent about Islam compared to other major religions. Using text analytics software he had developed, named Odin Text, he analyzed both the New International Version of both the Old and New Testaments, as well as an English language translation of the Quran. It took just 2 minutes for his software to read and analyze 3 books. By categorizing words into 8 emotions, which is joy, anticipation, anger, disgust, sadness, surprise, fear, anxiety, and trust, the analysis found the Bible scored higher for anger and much lower for trust than the Quran. Further analysis found the Old Testament was more violent than the New Testament and more than twice as violent as the Quran. However, he adds, first, I want to make very clear that we have not set out to prove or disapprove that Islam is more violent than other religions. Moreover, we realize that the Old and New Testaments and the Quran are neither the only literature in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, nor do they constitute the sum of these religions' teachings and protocols. I must also re-emphasize that this analysis is superficial and the findings are by no means intended to be conclusive. Ours is a 30,000 feet cursory view of 3 texts, which is the Quran and the Old and New Testaments respectively. This article is available at the Institute for Islamic Services at 330 Carmen City, Nojam. Alternatively, you can find it on www.instituteforislamicservices.co.za. Jazakallah.